Transform your product idea into a business reality. My name is Callie Keene, and this is End Hype. So how do we get something made? So you've done your customer discovery. You have an awesome team. You've got your go-to-market strategy and your traction. So you're like, people want this thing. I have the idea. People want it. I have the team. But who can I partner with to make this not just 1 or 10 or 100, but thousands or millions of units? How do you find the right manufacturing partner? And it's not just so simple, because manufacturing is such a broad thing, right? It's a lot of different, I don't make clothing, for instance, because it's relatively simple. So this isn't a video of how to find somebody to make your t-shirt. If you do need that, I've got a great friend that works in clothing, and he can do all of that for you. I don't do that, but I'm kind of like tipping my hat to the first tip that I'm really gonna give you, right? I'm giving you a hint. But how do you get complicated things made, right? How do you find a manufacturer that can make it to the quality that you want, to the specification, in the volume that you want? So it's more complicated than just searching on the internet, using ThomasNet or Alibaba or IndiaMart or one of those websites. And if you've ever tried to contact domestic manufacturers in particular, but this will work for pretty much manufacturers in the world, if you just email, it seems like those emails go into a black hole. And if you do get a bite back, it's a no bid, or they're asking for things that you don't know what they mean. Maybe best case scenario, you kind of get rebuffed. The thing to understand is manufacturers live in a precise world. It's a butting heads offshoot of engineering. So things need to be precise. They need to be correct. Otherwise, it's very difficult to quote something. It's very difficult to work with somebody. So a lot of manufacturers, unless you present a good case, it's difficult, or they outright do not want to work with emerging entrepreneurs and startups, because it's very frustrating. They want to have repeat business. They want to have growing business. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to find them, how to work with them, and what are some early indicators of what a good manufacturer would look like. Okay, so before we get into some of the tips on actually how to find the manufacturers, I want to talk about what information that you need to present. And this is critical, because as a manufacturer, I receive a lot of kind of like phishing tales, right? Like, hey, do you have this? Can you do this? And I'm like, we can make pretty much anything, right? So they're not asking the right questions. Today I just received an NDA from somebody I've never talked to. They didn't even call. They said, hey, sign this NDA. I'll send this quote. They get a no quote right away, right? So what information do you need, right? And, right off the bat, especially if you're working domestically, like, it doesn't hurt to pick up the phone and introduce yourself. And something that we coach entrepreneurs in is how to actually communicate what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, so you can present well when you talk to potential partners, including manufacturers. But introduce yourself, act like a human being. I think starting the conversation with a legal agreement is a little cagey. If you really are sending something that is so proprietary that it requires an NDA, there's going to be a time and place for that, but that's usually after the conversation of, hey, let's just find out if we're a good fit, right? We'll go into some of those questions kind of at the end, is like, what do you even ask these people to see if that's somebody that we want to be involved in? And then there'll be pretty willing to sign an NDA. But I mean, otherwise I'd be signing 100 NDAs a week. Nobody wants to do that. But beyond that, let's say that they seem like they might be a good fit. You'd like to get a quote. You'd like to get some information out of them. What do you need? And the first piece of this is design information. I don't want to see you sending super long 2-page emails describing what you're trying to do or handwritten doodles. It's going to get you nowhere. What you need to have is a 3D model of your product. You need to have 2D drawings of your product, right? So you need to have proper design information. If it has a PCBA, have all of the files available to send to them, right? Don't describe what the board should do in an email. And you'd be surprised if you're thinking who would do that. A lot of people would do that. That kind of goes into that, that funnel is like, if I get that email and it describes their product, but there's no drawing, I know that's probably not somebody who's at the stage that it's beneficial for me to work with, right? There probably is a manufacturer. There's definitely like a makerspace or a community organization that those people at that stage can jump into and start collaborating with. But generally at that stage, that's going to be a no quote from a professional manufacturing organization. We send a little email with resources that people can go out into the community and get the information a little bit more mature. But if you've built a prototype and you have all the design information, you have the proper mechanical manufacturing drawings, you have your PCBA package, you have your wiring all done, all what have you, mechanical, electrical, all that stuff settled. You should also have some assembly instructions, usually just pictures like step 1, step 2. If there is any complex assembly involved, knowing the sequence of events will be pretty informative. If you're having somebody put together a full stack product, right? They're making the board, they're putting it together, they're ultrasonic welding it, like a plastic enclosure. If they're doing that whole thing, you need to have good testing procedures, good quality control procedures. Any IoT device, any piece of electronics, it should have a way for that manufacturer to test it to make sure that it works. And if you don't have that, if you haven't built that into the product, consider adding that into your roadmap, right? Consider knowing what the product should do, or how do I know what's good or what's not good, right? Very important. You need to be able to tell the person with truth how many product, like how many you're actually going to order. Like, not just right now say, hey, I'm going to order 1. That's great. Manufacturers that can make 10,000, they don't want to make 1 of anything, right? They may do that on the path to 10,000, but you might have to place an order where it's, hey, we'll produce 1 and then 10 and then 100 and 1,000 like this in this roadmap. So understand what the minimum order quantities that you will actually need are, and be prepared to kind of negotiate around that from a development roadmap perspective, right? So a lot of manufacturers will have their own minimum order quantity or minimum revenue quantity, like an amount of money that if it's below this, they're not really going to make money because the administrative cost on the contract, the project manager, the spin up on new product costs more than what you're going to pay for the parts. So like manufacturers make money on repeat jobs, right? And until your parts are being delivered month after month, it's like a prototype, right? Or it's more of a project than it is a product. right? It has a definite end. Until it's in some kind of stable sense of production, it's more of a project. So the thing I see more often is entrepreneurs using what we call entrepreneur math, right? And they're like, hey, I'm going to sell 10,000 this year and 100,000 next year. Well, the process that we're talking about always takes a little bit longer than you think, and we can help you roadmap out how long that is. But if your product is reasonably, let's say, fully designed, maybe the last stage of design for manufacturing hasn't been done because you haven't produced it at volume. Let's say that it is done. It can take you 12 months or even 18 months to be in stable manufacturing, production manufacturing. It can take a long time. It could be 3 months. It could be 6 months. But more than likely, it's going to take longer than that to find the manufacturer, to spin them up, to get the various prototyping stages, get everything approved, and getting it stable. It's going to take longer than you want. So if you say, hey, we're going to make 1,000 and then we're going to go to market and we're going to make 10,000 or 100,000, a knowledgeable manufacturer knows that that's not the case. Right? It's not true. It's better to be able to roadmap that out and say, hey, we're going to get these design validation test units. These are the ones that are going for compliance testing. The compliance testing is going to take 8 to 12 weeks. Based on that, we may have changes, we may not. Then we're going to be moving into the next phase where we're going to deliver this many units, and then those are going to go out to our early customers, investors, and potential partners. At that stage, then we may have some other small changes, but after that, we will be looking at production volumes, and our projected volumes based on this initial feedback is those 10,000 units. So that's great. So now I know you want 100, 1,000, and 10,000. I can quote those volumes based on the information that I have today, and also I can kind of make a mental model that's going to take this long, 6 months plus, let's call it 12, let's call it 12 months. Okay, great. But this is how you can have a more reasonable conversation with a manufacturer. And this is me, take this with a grain of salt, but I think they'll appreciate it. So let's move on to, now that we kind of know what we need to get started, let's talk about how we find a manufacturer for your product. So the first top of mind question that people have is, should I pick a domestic partner or should I go global, overseas? And there's a temptation with the overseas thing to think that there's a China button and it's the easy button and we're just going to hit it and it's going to be done. It is very difficult to get things made overseas, and it requires a well-developed skill set to do. And I think anyone that's developed multiple products, especially, let's call them medium to high complexity commercial products, they'll understand it's quite an endeavor to get done, and it doesn't matter where it is. Physical products are hard, right? Hardware is hard, whether it's local, domestic, or global. There's challenges involved. But that being said, look around you. There's things everywhere. People are getting it done. People have done it before. So it's not impossible. But let's bifurcate this and let's look at what the advantages are to domestic and what the advantages are to foreign. And by foreign, that might mean like Canada or Mexico, right? It might mean China, it might mean India, but let's look local at first, right? So when people are asking about, for us to do this process, for me to do this process, we start local and then we move out to domestic. There's different regions of the U.S. that are better at certain things. You can think like, hey, this one area, they have far more automotive-related manufacturing, and those are these types of processes. This other area has far more aerospace-related companies. So if I need that kind of a precision, maybe the Northwest is a little bit better, or maybe the Southwest. So the advantages to local are that you're going to have a little bit better communication. I mean, if they're really local, you can just stop there and sit across the table and talk through it with them, which is fantastic. But domestic, you're going to have better communication, and it's not a language barrier thing. That's a common misconception. It's like a time zone thing. If you find a mistake, it's not going to be resolved to the next day, and you lose a day every time. That's just a piece of that. And there are significant cultural differences depending on which country that you're working with, where when you feel that something is resolved or a negotiation is done or something will be done, it might not actually get done the way you think that it's going to get done, just because there's kind of a gap in that cultural understanding. And it's difficult to describe, but it definitely is. It's always there. The communication is just not as 100% clear, right? I think one of my favorite things about domestic manufacturing, and it's because I love visiting manufacturing facilities, is that it's easy to do a factory audit. In foreign manufacturing, you're gonna have to go to China, you're gonna have to go to Malaysia, Vietnam, Korea, which might seem fun, but it's not as convenient, right? So it's a little bit more difficult to do. But it's a big thing. Is like, if you want that company to actually be making it, you want to see the facility. I would advise to do that if you can, or hire somebody to go visit the factory, and we'll get a little bit more into that, what that process looks like. In China in particular, there's a lot of trading companies, and they'll say like, yeah, we do that, and they actually don't do anything. They coordinate, and quite honestly, and this is in my opinion, if the price is good and that person is handling a lot of the headaches of dealing with in-country, and they're aggregating a lot of processes together, why not? Why not? Maybe in eventuality you'll have to move away and save that extra percentage, but certainly early on, paying a small percentage on top for project management is welcome for me, right? It's a welcome thing. But if you're able to go to the factory, regardless of location, you'll get a deeper insight into manufacturing. If you have an engineering background and you understand manufacturing, that's great, but it's not as common, and I don't think any person really understands the scale of manufacturing until you visit a large production factory. Even if you visit a factory like K-Form, you visit a facility, it's like, we're a small facility. We have over 30,000 square feet of equipment. So you see it and you think like, there's a lot of parts. There's a lot of parts that go through here. But if you look at some of the larger manufacturers that I work with, either through K-Form or Red Blue Collective, they might be 300,000 or 3 million square feet. They're massive, right? They have pieces of equipment that are as big as departments of our facility, right? Injection molding or totally autonomous, lights out machining that's running for weeks and weeks at a time. It's crazy. It's crazy. So being able to actually go to the facility, you get this deeper insight into what that company can do, and really how manufacturing works. Like, you're going to make better designs if you understand what can't be done. So just a simple one. Of course, the advantage of domestic is generally it's a faster shipping time. I will argue that the manufacturing time for simple products is unbelievable if you do global manufacturing. So if you don't care about paying air freight because you need something right now, you might be able to get that product before you get started domestically. You might actually get it in hand. But it's not necessarily, it depends on the industry. It depends on what you're trying to do. It's just, this is why we've got to weigh these things. But in general, in the long term, shipping is going to be faster the closer they are. It's why Mexico is very appealing, right? Because of tariff situation and because of shipping. It's pretty appealing. You could, in theory, go there. If you want to go to Juarez, they have a lot of manufacturing and a lot of other issues. But there is a huge amount of manufacturing in Mexico, Central South America, and of course in Canada. So it's kind of a nice middle ground to look at. But that segues into talking about tariffs. It's like we went through a little hiccup there with a possible, not actual trade war, but some severe tariff situations. If you manufacture domestically, you can kind of sleep easy at night and not have to worry about those potential problems with maybe tariffs jacking up through the roof and your product suddenly costs twice as much, right? And then legal resolution. So if there is a problem involving intellectual property or any type of contractual agreement, usually people are concerned at this point with IP. If you do go domestically, it's pretty straightforward. What you're going to do, what your next steps are going to do. If your product is being manufactured overseas and is replicated, the process is a little less intuitive, to put it nicely. But, advantages of global sourcing, right, of buying from a foreign country, is that there are pockets in the world that are much better at things once you open up your selection to worldwide. Like if I want the best plastic parts in the world, I know for a fact, and I know that just 50 minutes from here, there's a great plastic injection molded company, right? There's a great company that does injection molding, and they do large parts that are awkward to ship, and they do things for the defense industry. So I kind of know where they fit. I've been to their factory. It's awesome. But if I needed a reasonably complex consumer product, right, CPG done, it would be a nightmare, right? The tooling engineers that are available in Shenzhen, right, not only are much better because there's so much injection molding being done, but they're very numerous, right? There's 100,000 of them versus one, right? So getting something done, the density of capability for different industries is unbelievable when you start being able to source and say, this area is really good at this. And this goes across really any industries. We've seen a lot of fantastic designers that are in Eastern Europe, or like same thing for PCBA designers as like web designers. It's just interesting is that once you break out of that and you start looking around, there's hotspots of specific skill and talent around the world. And if you open your supply chain up to use those, not only will the cost be dramatically lower, but you can get dramatically higher quality as well. So that's the pesky thing, right? Communication we've got with domestic, but when it comes down to cost, initial turnaround, quality. It's better if we can open it up to the entire world. But that makes it even harder to find your perfect manufacturing partner. So we kind of know what we need to start talking to these people, and we know what's better or worse. So unless you're doing something that's at very low volumes and or is highly innovative, you should be open to the opportunity of broadening where you're getting something manufactured. So, but still, how do we find these people? Like, the number one tip that I'm going to give you is to ask for a referral. Okay, people want to do this the backwards way. They want to find a factory on like ThomasNet or one of the other listings of manufacturers, and they want to ask for references. Think about like if you were going to apply for a job, right? You wouldn't give the references to like the time that you got fired because you did something awful, right? Nobody would do that. They're going to give the good references. It's not super helpful. What is helpful is to ask somebody that you reasonably believe in their capability, right? Or they have a vested interest in your success, and ask for them for a referral. So go in that direction. You can ask your mentor, right? And I know I've belabored this on the show and in across our content, is like you should have a mentor. That's kind of like full stop on it. How to find a mentor, that's a different show, but you should have a mentor. But ask your product development partner, right? And if you have a full stack team and everyone has experience, you probably already know where to get something manufactured because they've gone through this process. So you're probably not even listening to this podcast anymore. You're like, Callie, I got this, okay? I've developed dozens of products, so like I know exactly where to get this done. Great, that's amazing. Comment down below. Tell me what you're working on. I'd love to see how I can help you in a different way. But for those people that are just forming their teams, you're applying to Innovation Challenge, like you have an idea and you're trying to bring it to market, you don't have that, right? So in our process, and it's steps 7 and 9, we actually start reaching out to development partners and manufacturing partners in an organized way to get a roadmap of what it's going to take financially, time-wise, effort-wise, and hours to get the idea to market. And when we talk to product development companies, so they have manufactured dozens or hundreds or thousands of products, they are going to have a far more mature supply chain network of suppliers than you will by searching around the internet. They're like a curated internet already. So like if you have a product and you go to your product development partner or a potential product development partner and you ask them, hey, where can I get this thing manufactured? They can kind of, go at bat with you too. Also, they're going to help you with all of those outputs that you need to have clear communication with potential factories, right? Because that's kind of like their job. The next piece of this is if you don't have a product development partner, ask a startup, right? Now, startups have a lot of war stories about how they overcome these amazing obstacles and challenges of product development. And sometimes I don't have the heart to tell them, like, that's just how product development is. It's difficult, right? They're successful because they succeeded. But that being said, they have way more experience than most people, and they did get on the other side of that success. It takes a good partner and tenacity and a lot of effort. So that's great. They can probably give you a lot of tips as well. But if just go search for a startup, maybe a local startup, and you can interview them, talk to them, and say like, hey, I have a totally different product, but kind of shares the same supply chain. It's got plastic, it's got some cables, it's got a PCBA, it gets assembled. Like, we're looking for a manufacturing partner. Can you recommend any? Or, where did you get quotes from? Be great. I think asking, people don't want to ask, especially like us technical people. We want to like figure it out. We want to crack the code for ourselves. And the code really isn't asking, right? Somebody has already figured this out, and our time needs to be spent doing things that can't be replicated, that haven't been done before, right? Nobody's built a business just like you built it. Nobody has that idea just like you, right? Nobody understands the customer like you. Do those things that are unique, right? Those are your unfair advantages. Focus on those things and spend like zero time working on something that somebody else has figured out. So guarantee whatever your product is, there's somebody in your area or your region that has already done it. And if you want, just look at AngelList, right? Search AngelList, search and find the contact information of startup. Go on Kickstarter, right? Look at somebody that has a product that's similar in nature to yours, not the same industry, because that doesn't matter. Same manufacturing processes, right? Make sure that they actually delivered on the product, right? So look in the comments. If 1 million people are saying, "Where's my stuff?" They probably didn't figure out manufacturing, right? But if the comments are, "Man, this is so cool. This is great," reach out to them. In my experience, most entrepreneurs are really happy to share that experience with other entrepreneurs because it's just a moment of their time and they can have massive impact on somebody's life. Why not, right? And it's not going to hurt them at all to say, "Hey, I have this factory that does this thing for me in China, but I really would recommend this partner, and this is why." Total shortcut. I mean, our second option is to go for some risky fishing, right? And everybody knows Alibaba and Alibaba Express, right? And like, that might be okay for drop shipping and white labeling. Like if you want a water bottle, but you want it blue and you want it with your logo on it, yeah. Don't go talk to a bottle manufacturer. They're going to want you to make 100,000 of them. Go find it on Alibaba and ask if they'll customize it. They will, and you'll have it done. You'll have it in a couple weeks. It's great. But if you're a high-growth startup and you're making like a thing, like an actual piece of innovation, you're making a IoT device, you're making something that solves a real challenge, right? Things that has multiple assembly steps, lots of different components. Going to Alibaba is going to be a nightmare. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of contacting. It's a lot of spreadsheets. It's not a smooth path, right? And that is the temptation, is to think, once I have my prototype, once I have funding, once I have all these pieces in place, manufacturing is just sending this package and getting parts, and maybe there'll be a little hiccup. It's just not. It's just not like that, and it won't be smooth if you approach it with that kind of ambivalence, right? So if you are looking in that direction, I want to sideline you real quick and to look at sourcing companies, right? So there are companies that they just work in a couple of countries, and what they do is curate the factories, or they do the factory audit. They build the supply chain for you. And yeah, you do pay a little bit more money for that, but honestly, factories are going to give these people who are very professional, they're going to give them a cheaper price. So you might pay 10% to this person, or they might charge you a monthly fee for project management, but you're going to save a massive amount of money in the long run because you won't have the reach to find the real factories, right? They might not be on Alibaba. You won't have the person that's in the country to actually visit that factory. They do. So if you're interested in some of those types of companies, comment down below, message me. I'll give you some names. some friends that they specifically do this, and we've used in the past for startups that we're coaching. So I highly recommend going that stage. I know that it's tempting to kind of like cowboy it up and do it all yourself. And maybe there's a point where the volume makes sense and development's done, and you take all that over and you hire a procurement person and they handle your supply chain. But I mean, initially, this is a shortcut, right? I'm trying to give you a tip or a hack to get started faster and not like figure everything out. It's much easier to learn by partnering with one of these companies than learn by just slamming your head into the wall a million times and making every mistake possible. So that leads into my last real tip here that I want to leave you with is how validation gets done. And I think the initial portion of that is a phone conversation. It might be an email, might be a Zoom. I know everybody's got Zoom burnout. Did like 4 today. I'm done, right? But validation is a process, right? We want to start early because we don't want to waste anybody's time. Just because somebody's not the best fit for you doesn't mean that they're not an amazing manufacturer. And you might be in the startup community and you might be able to connect them with somebody else. You might have a next project, and as you grow, you're a better fit, right? So we're working with a company to scale their manufacturing. And right now their volumes, we have to use a particular type of company, but we've done interviews with companies at different sizes. So like the quantity is over 10,000 of a unit a month, right? And you're like, wow, that seems like a pretty good amount of product, but that's so low that combining that entire contract into 1 month is the minimum order quantity of the next largest manufacturer. So it's for a production manufacturing process, die casting, and you can get products die cast in like a couple hundred. You can get it in cheaper tools and get it in low quantities, 20 if you want 50. It's not very economical. You can do whatever you want though. But at the medium size, people are getting 10,000, 50,000 a month. And what's interesting is that each of those companies are separate. They don't connect to each other. And like the minimum order, the equipment that company uses, the next size company, their minimum order is 75,000 a month of a product. That's the minimum that they do. And they preferred it to be 150,000 a month of a product, stable production. So when they do the phone interview, like we're going to talk about in validation, they ask, hey, well, how many are you trying to get made? And they want a EAU, estimated annual usage, and they want it broken into monthly deliveries. So like, what would you expect to get per month or per week? So they don't want to just ship you 3 million parts at the end of the year. They want to know how many per month are we going to be delivering. So really interesting. And it doesn't mean that they're like sticking their noses up at it. It doesn't mean that they're like, too good for us. That's just what their business does. They've built an amazing business. And in the case of the larger company, they're a worldwide company. They make automotive parts. They make like transmissions. They do, they make things that are in everyday mass production products. And if you look at like a washing machine, the little bracket that's die cast that's on your door, making 1 million of those is not that big of a deal, right? They probably make 1 million every single year, and they have for 20 years for every washer brand that's available. So it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that they're not a great fit. So when I have that initial phone call, I like to ask people's expertise. There's a temptation for us to want to know what processes that they do, which is important. What equipment they have, but it's better to know like what kind of expertise that they do. What do they focus on? So like K-Form focuses on electronics enclosures, right? But if you come here, we have all the mills and the fabrication equipment, the welding equipment, painting equipment that you'd see at places that make totally different products. But we don't make car parts. We make defense electronics enclosures. Or Red Blue Collective, we focus on full stack consumer products and innovation products. So things like in unmanned, things in industrial automation and robotics. So we're getting into and clean energy. So it's like our expertise is in those because that's where our industry connections are. It's where the best application of our talents are. So if somebody calls and they want a novelty product, I'm like, that's so cool. And a part of me kind of dies a little bit because I want to do it, but it's not the best application of our resources, right? So we're not the best fit. But yeah, ask what their expertise or their specialization is. Again, you can ask for references. You can ask for past project experience if you'd like, but people are going to give you, they're going to give you the good stuff, right? It's just the way that it is. And I want to know that at least it exists. So ask away. But I think it's more important to ask what project size and what customer size that they deal with. Are they going to be startup friendly? Are they entrepreneur friendly? Is it somebody that you can grow with? Or is it somebody that you're going to initially work with and then you have to plan immediately to switch over and do this whole process again, right? So that's going to go back to that roadmap and having it really clear cut. But for me, it's like, what's your expertise? What's your customer size? Do you deal with people at $2,000, $2,500, $200,000, right? 2 million, 20 million? Like what's kind of the order of magnitude that are we talking about here? Sure, go ahead, ask for references. I think that's great. I want you to ask for certs, right? Just what certs do they have? If they have testing, are they a certified lab, right? Is their equipment certified? Do they have ISO 9001, 2015 registration? It's pretty easy to get ISO registration. So if somebody doesn't have it, I'm pretty wary of what they're doing. If they're in the automotive industry, do they have TS? If they're in aerospace, do they have AS? Like what certifications do they have? What qualifications do they have, right? Those are important too. Nothing's really going to beat going there, but if you can't go there, get some great paperwork. But in that conversation, I can't stress this enough, is don't overpromise what you're going to do, right? They might overpromise what they can deliver. Don't overpromise the amount of work that you're going to send people. It's going to lead to resentment, and it's going to lead to maybe them taking the job and then not being able to work with you. You don't want somebody to get everything all figured out and then have to drop you as a client. All right, so quick summary here. We want to understand a little bit from the manufacturer's perspective, like what they're thinking and maybe why you got denied in the past and what you need to be able to start that conversation. I want you to understand the drawbacks and advantages of where you source a product, right? And why that's so strategic and important. And then we gave some quick tips on how to find factories. And I think the number one is to ask, right? I can give you deep, complex ways of doing this or doing that. But asking usually is the shortcut to life. So please start there. If you'd like to do your risky fishing and build this yourself, at least get a guide, right? Get a sourcing company or get somebody that can give you some tours. I can give you plenty of contacts for people that do that professionally, that aren't me, right? that will help you, guide you through that process, and they have different business models. So I'd at least cheat like that, because you're going to start on second or third base versus starting overwhelmed and confused. And then understand what questions you should ask to validate if that manufacturer is a good partner for you, right? For your size, for what you're trying to achieve, for the way that you like to communicate and who you are, right? Manufacturing is a massive discipline and massive skill set, and it is commonly kind of grouped together in one lump, right? In the manufacturing industry. It's not really an industry. There's a lot of different industries within that make up that conglomeration. So as you break down and you get more experience, you'll understand a little bit more of what I'm talking about. But manufacturers, contract manufacturers, they have businesses too, right? So when you reach out, it's got to be a win-win, right? You're selling them on the belief that you're going to be a good customer, that you're going to grow your account, and it's going to be meaningful for them in at least on the revenue side, right? But I appreciate that. If you have specific questions, challenges, bad experiences, good experiences that have happened, comment below, message me. As always, if there's a key piece of information that you have a question about manufacturing your product, finding a manufacturer for your product, or anything else, message me. That's how I came up with this topic today. Is I was in a conversation giving a presentation, and a guy said, how come every time I talk to a manufacturer, they don't want to talk to me? Well, he doesn't have documentation. He doesn't really know what he's trying to achieve. And so the conversations were kind of all over the map. And manufacturing's racing, man. I'm selling time. I'm selling my expertise in time. I don't have time for that. So that's why, and hopefully we'll be able to start helping him out. But that's what gave me the idea for today's show. And I appreciate people listening and asking me those kind of questions, so I don't have to think up content. So, message me. But if there was any value today, if you got any piece of value from one of those tips or some random thing that I said, yes, it's helpful to hit the like button. It's helpful to subscribe, but share this out. Send this to a friend. Send this to your startup buddy. Send this to your entrepreneur buddy. Send this to your friend who thinks that they're an influencer and they're trying to do silly affiliate stuff when, like we've talked about before, they're making pennies on the dollar. They should make their own product and really make money. So how do you transition between being an affiliate or doing white label and actually owning a business, like building a product, selling a product? So send them this, share this out, and let's help grow this thing, right? I'd appreciate it. That's it for me. My name's Callie Keene. This has been End Hype.